It's very likely you or people you love have encountered emotional abuse at some point in your lives. Someone suffered at school or college, another person faced such issues at work, and others felt its burden at home. And that's the thing that hurts deep and leaves scars for years to come. Hi, it's Wisey. Today, we'll figure out what emotional abuse is, why it happens, and, most importantly, how to deal with it. If you're watching us for the first time, make sure to like the video and hit the subscribe button. We create content about anything and everything. Signs of emotional abuse. First, let's work out what emotional abuse is exactly. If someone offended you once, it isn't emotional abuse. Sometimes, people are simply evil, but it doesn't make them abusers. In other cases, something harsh slipped from a person's tongue, but they're nice most of the time. What distinguishes real abuse from occasional rudeness is repetition. Seeing the pattern in people's behavior means you're likely suffering from abuse. Sign 1. Abusers use violent language. Emotional abusers are very cruel in what they say. It's common for people who harm your feelings to use offensive language. Have you ever had someone call you names or even use threats when they are angry? If this individual seems to choose the worst and most painful things to attack, it's probable they are abusive towards you. After all, what is emotional abuse? It's causing pain to a person without physically touching them, and words can be excruciating. Sign 2. Abusers isolate you. This is one of the most problematic signs of emotional abuse. You may not notice it at first, but as you spend more time with your abuser, you start to see the red flags. An emotional abuser usually slowly separates you from your family, friends, or spouse. Sometimes, you witness this individual purposefully encouraging conflict between you and those you love. In other situations, they may say things like, "I feel like that friend of yours is using you. Are you sure you can trust them?" Abusers resort to such phrases and efforts with only one goal: to make you emotionally dependent on them. Sign 3. Abusers dismiss your feelings. Many people who've lived with abusers admit that they often couldn't really talk about their problems. Have you ever tried to talk to your abuser about how you feel about the cruel treatment? How did they respond? If they tried to twist your words or deny your feelings, you're talking to a gaslighter. This term describes a person who plays with your mind, questioning the facts that you clearly remember. Even more so, you may notice that the other person places guilt on you and makes you the villain of the situation. Sounds scary, doesn't it? Sign 4. Abusers control you. Although some people are simply emotionally neglectful, a large share of emotional abusers want to own you. Such people always know what's best for you. What they don't know, they plan to find out. A typical example is a mother who tells their kid whom they should and shouldn't be friends with and requires them to show their telephone and private messages. It can intersect with some physical punishments, but not necessarily. Not all abuse is flagrant, though sometimes possessive individuals behave intentionally soft and harmless. What matters is the motive. Now, it's time for the fact of the day from Wisey. Did you know that between 50 and 80% of adults will experience some form of emotional abuse at some point in their lives? You may be surprised at this number, but it includes abuse between partners, children, and parents and friends. As you see, it's a pretty high figure, which tells a lot about the severity of the problem. Why does abuse happen? As a victim of abuse, you may ask yourself, why did I deserve this? What did I do wrong? The thing is, you didn't do anything wrong at all, but some things make emotional abuse more likely to happen. Cause 1. Unequal power dynamic. You might have noticed that many cases of emotional abuse happened between people who were initially not equal in their relationship. If one individual depends on the other, it makes one side unable to respond and react to injustice, which in turn, makes the problem systematic. Cause 2. Unprocessed psychological problems. It's not surprising that an abuser is often the person who was abused or traumatized in their past. We should remember that it doesn't justify any adverse behaviors and pressure put on you, but knowing the roots of the problem is essential. On the other hand, it can be reversed. Many victims of emotional abuse are already psychologically vulnerable when an abuser identifies them as a suitable object for humiliation. Cause 3. Lack of psychological education. Let's not forget that we live in a society that often discourages talks about psychological health. We've only recently started to openly converse about mental health and our emotional needs, so it's often common for the older generations to be uneducated enough on this problem. Suppose you know an older person who is also abusive. In that case, you may notice that they view the topic of psychological health as unimportant, but it can also happen to your peers and people younger than you. Cause 4. Lack of stability. Emotional abuse can be very well-intentional, but a lot of the time, the abuser just reacts like that to the whole world around them. Research shows that emotional abuse often occurs in vulnerable families. For example, parents who have to work hard and never get any rest can gradually respond inconsistently to life's triggers, eventually harming their children. Now, before we move to the next section, let's do a little quiz together. Try to identify the subtle signs of emotional abuse from the following list. A. Spending every waking hour with someone. B. Giving you money. C. Showing emotional compassion. D. Occasionally calling and chatting with someone for hours. There are 2 correct answers here, A and B. While spending much time with you may be a sign of love and dedication, you may want to check if it doesn't have any obsessive sides. And what's with the money, you ask? The term financial abuse describes a relationship where one side keeps another in control by not giving money to them or using it as a way of influence. So, make sure to preserve your financial independence. How to deal with emotional abuse. Now that you know that you suffer from emotional abuse, you may be seriously wondering what to do about it. And that's great because staying in the same situation isn't a good idea. Step 1. Understand and recognize it. The greatest problem with emotional abuse is that it's difficult to pinpoint. Unlike the more obvious physical violence, it's hard to notice. Most of the time, we sense something's wrong but can't understand the real issue. Ask yourself about how you feel and why. Try to slowly approach the topic and identify the troubling signs. Once you recognize that you are being abused, don't forget about it. It's easy to reject this idea whenever you're in a peaceful situation with your abuser. But remember, it's just a part of the cycle. Step 2. Don't isolate yourself. People suffering from emotional abuse are often in a situation where they either can't or don't want to communicate with others. In some cases, your abuser has put you in isolation. In other circumstances, you did this yourself due to tiredness, guilt, or something else. Break this habit and reach out for help. Contact your friends and family, but only those you trust completely. You don't need new sources of doubt. Step 3. If possible, leave the relationship. In some cases, our abusers are people we love with all of our heart, like our parents or family members, and going no contact can be impossible. But think wisely. Do you deserve to be treated this way? Can you imagine living like this till the end of your life? If the answers terrify you, consider your options. In many situations, limiting contact with an abuser is enough. For example, your ex-friend is cruel to you the closer you get. In this case, see each other once a year, just when social situations dictate it. In other conditions, leaving the relationship is the only option you have. Remember, it isn't your task to make your abuser happy. It isn't your problem that they have unprocessed emotions. If you stay with them, you won't be able to care for yourself. Step 4. Stop trying to change your abuser. That's the last and most important thing that is also very painful to hear. It doesn't matter how much we want our abusers to change and how many times we repeat that we love them. Unfortunately, nothing will happen until your abuser wants to transform and break these dangerous patterns. And you can't make them change. It's a very toxic belief with which we all grow up, that being good enough will change the cruel heart. In reality, it rarely happens. If you decide to remain in contact with your abuser, limit your expectations. Instead of trying to show your true feelings, just keep your conversation clear, calm, and impersonal. Your abuser may resist at first, but after some time, they'll see that it doesn't work and will accept the new model of relationship. Well, that's all we have for today. After this video, you know the signs and causes of abuse and what to do with it. Remember that emotional abuse is difficult to overcome, and sometimes you may feel stuck in one place. Don't let it discourage you. You will do it, and your life will become better. If you think this video is helpful, like it and subscribe to our channel. We're always here to bring you new content about anything and everything. See you next time.